First, let's do a Kiddush and Motzi, if you have some wine. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen. Today is National Refugee Shabbat. In better times, we would have been all together in the shul and we would have had a lot to do with that, and the choir would be singing a special song, a refugee song, which they never got a chance to do. Although that song was posted with a previous email, not sung by our choir. But in any case, tonight begins the 24th day of the month of Adar. We're told to be happy in Adar, the month of Purim. But as this month progressed, that became more and more difficult. May next year's Adar be doubly joyful. Meanwhile, the month of Nisan approaches, and at the full of its moon, the festival of Pesach. And Passover will be difficult this year. With social distancing, large-scale family Sidarim and community Sidarim become basically impossible. But let's never allow the adversity of the day to interfere with the fundamental messages of Pesach. And perhaps the most essential of all is that a full life, a life of redemption and spiritual, material, emotional, and physical fulfillment is impossible if we are slaves. Thus we thank God for freedom. We were slaves, and then we were free. We wandered as refugees, and then we found our promised land. Throughout our history, violence and persecution have driven the Jewish people to wander in search of a safe place to call home. We are a refugee people. At the Passover Seder, we gather to retell the story of our original wandering and the freedom that we then found. But we do not just retell the story. We are commanded to imagine ourselves as though we, personally, went forth out of Egypt. We are to imagine the experience of being victimized because of who we are, of being enslaved, and then being free. As we step into that historical experience, we can't help but draw to mind the millions of displaced people and refugees around the world today, fleeing violence and persecution and seeking protection. Let us not let our concern wane during these days when the news seems to be almost entirely about COVID-19. Remember how we once, only a little while ago, read almost daily about the humanitarian crises, watched xenophobic hate crimes, and been overwhelmed by the sheer number of people being persecuted. In the United States, we've experienced laws closing the doors of refuge to people in need, just as they were once closed against us in our time of need. And even now, we hear spurious rumors that the virus is spread by refugees trying to get into the country. These are not true. Closing borders may well be a necessary step to decrease the spread of the disease, but closed borders almost always inspire increased xenophobia. We have to work hard to make sure that this disease, xenophobia, does not infect us. That would be an infection that would be ultimately more damaging than the virus that we all fear. Arami Oved Avi, a very famous line from the Bible, usually translated, "My father was a wandering Aramean." It was recited by all Israelites during the Feast of Weeks. To recite such a line during a joyful festival was to be reminded that although settled and landowning and well-fed now, we can remember all too clearly being hungry and chaste and homeless. Why don't we have such a ceremony here in America? Our Thanksgiving Day doesn't manage to evoke a similar sense of a past in which we're fleeing for our lives, hungry and tired and suffering. Thanksgiving Day should be our Refugee Remembrance Day. In any case, the term Oved does not really mean wandering. Noded means wandering. Bible readers will remember that when God cast Cain out for murdering his brother, he sent him to the land of Nod. It's not a place. Nod means the land in which he wanders. Cain became a refugee. The term Oved really means perishing. I would translate the line, my father, and I would prefer my ancestors, were refugee Arameans. And by the way, Arameans were the people who lived in the area that is today Syria, one of the primary sources of perishing refugees in our own time. If people forever remember that, no matter how settled, how at home, how prosperous they are, not long ago their ancestors were destitute refugees fleeing terror or oppression or relentless poverty, maybe the general population's attitude toward persons in that same predicament right now would be more open, more welcoming. But it is a collective neurosis of all non-Native Americans to repress the fact that we are not Native Americans, but refugees who came later. And indeed, even the Native Americans did not originate on these continents. They themselves have stories of migrations from Asia. Even they were refugees. There is nobody living anywhere on the entire planet whose ancestors were not, at some point, refugees. Another term that the Bible uses frequently is ger. This is sometimes translated as stranger, although foreigner or alien probably is better. Ancient Israel, then as now, was a crossroads of peoples from Asia, Africa, and Europe, all coming and going for one reason or another. It was at any time you pick a land that was filled with gerim. And in keeping with Israel's long memory of its own history, we have countless repetitions of the phrase, "You shall treat the stranger as yourselves," or "Be kind to the stranger, for you yourselves were strangers in the land of Egypt." And also, "There will be one law for yourself and the stranger." If only that were true for our own nation today. There is a vast gulf between how we, in fact, in the United States, treat refugees than what was expected of biblical Israelites. It's hard to reconcile a population that has so much respect for Holy Scripture, so often completely ignoring its admonitions. At this point, we continue with Kaddish. It's in the booklet on page 11. But first, we remember those taken from us this year. Eugenia Chutaransky, Yefim Chutaransky, Eleanor Meltzer, Martin Schwartz, Rosalind Goldstein, Shirley Blossom Feldman, Jean Richmond, Ruth Katz Prizer. And we remember those taken from us in years past, but at this time. Mitchell Barish, Alan Rodman, Nina Barry, Dorothy Slotnick Swan, Diane Isaacson, Belle Shatsky, Paul Lurie, Harold Kossover, Herman Davis, Sadie Cohn, Murray Goldberg, Faye Cohen, Sylvia Patel, Bob Walker, Abraham Marder, Ann Baxter, Bernard Cohen, Daniel Tunkel. We also remember the thousands who have already perished of COVID-19. We take them into our hearts together with those of our own family. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah. Amen. Ve'alma divrach hirutei v'yamlich malchutei b'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'b'chayei dechol beit Yisrael ba'agla u'vizman kariv imru. Amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevarach le'olam u'lalmei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnasei v'yitadar v'yitalev v'yitalal shemei dekudesha b'richu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata da'amiran be'alma v'imru. Amen. Yehei shlama Rabbah min shemaya v'chaim alenu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Oseh shalom b'imromav hu ya'aseh shalom alenu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen.